Stingy old Mr. Scrooge has long loved nothing or anyone but his own money. He did not understand the joy that Christmas and New Year brought to others. Therefore, on the eve of the holiday, the old man refused to let his assistant leave work early, who wanted to buy a present for his son. Mr. Scrooge even turned down his nephew's invitation to celebrate Christmas with his family, and also refused to donate money to help children in need. The old man closed his office late in the evening and went home. And then, in his bedroom, strange things began to happen. A wind blew from somewhere, thunder rumbled, and suddenly the ghost of his companion, who had died last Christmas, appeared in front of him. Mr. Scrooge was very scared and did not understand what was happening. The spirit said that after death he was punished for not doing good and not helping people during his lifetime. He did not want the old man to suffer the same fate. So he warned Scrooge that 3 other ghosts would soon visit him. After these words, the spirit disappeared. The old man pretended that nothing had happened. But soon, the ghost of a child appeared before him. Mr. Scrooge was stunned because it was the spirit of his past years. The ghost, with the help of magic, transferred them to the past. The old man saw himself as a little boy in the town where he was born and raised. He was decorating the Christmas tree, and he had a lot of fun. Then Mr. Scrooge saw himself in his youth, the day when, full of delight and hope, he proposed to his beloved. After that, the old man saw himself matured. His wife was crying, and he could not understand why she decided to part with him. The fact is that Scrooge no longer paid attention to her, but only thought about money. The old man could not look at such himself from the side, and asked the ghost to return him back. The spirit eventually disappeared, but another ghost appeared in its place. He carried Scrooge to his assistant's home on Christmas Eve. The whole family was sitting at a poor table. The old man was sure that they all hated him, but he became convinced that this was not so. The aide offered a toast to Mr. Scrooge's health, and his wife very willingly joined the toast. And then the old man noticed that the son of his assistant was sick. Scrooge felt sorry for the child and ashamed of his behavior. Then the ghost took the old man to the house of his nephew. His whole family was happy about the holiday. Most importantly, they left a seat at the table for Mr. Scrooge. The old man did not expect to see this. He always thought that the whole family hated him. Eventually the ghost disappeared, but the spirit of future years appeared in its place. He brought Mr. Scrooge to his own funeral. Everyone said that it became easier for them when the old man finally died. Only then did he realize that in his entire life he had not brought good to anyone. Then Scrooge saw his helper carrying flowers to his son's grave. The old man could no longer look at it, and asked the ghost to bring him back. The third spirit disappeared, and Scrooge was back at home. The old man finally decided to change for the better. Fortunately, he found that time had gone back a few hours. Mr. Scrooge decided not to waste a minute. He still had time to change everything. The old man was sincerely happy about the approaching Christmas. He sent the most expensive and fattest turkey to his assistant's house. Scrooge then sent a gift to the helper's son, and donated a huge amount of money to charity. After that, the old man went to celebrate Christmas with his nephew, where the whole family welcomed him. The next day, when Scrooge's assistant came to work, he raised his salary. For his son, the old man became a godfather. Mr. Scrooge gave the boy the best possible treatment, and he continued to enjoy a healthy life. Since then, the stingy old man has become the kindest and most generous person in the city, and has earned universal love and respect.
There lived a husband and wife. For a long time they already wanted to have a child, but he was not there. One day, my wife fell ill. The husband asked her what she wants the most. The wife replied that there was a magnificent garden nearby, where many of the most beautiful flowers grow. There is a beautiful Rapunzel in the garden. It looked so fresh and so green that she really wanted to taste it. But the garden was surrounded by a high fence, and no one dared to enter it, since this garden belonged to one witch. She possessed great power, and everyone in the world feared her. The husband loved his wife very much, and decided to get a Rapunzel for her, no matter what it cost him. And so at dusk he climbed over the stone fence into the sorceress's garden, in a hurry picked up a whole handful of green Rapunzel, and brought it to his wife. She immediately made herself a salad from it, and ate greedily. She liked this salad so much that the next day she wanted even more than before. The husband made his way into the garden again, but the witch was already standing in front of him. She glared at him angrily and said that he would pay a lot for stealing the Rapunzel. He asked the witch not to be angry, because he tore off the Rapunzel for his wife, who was very ill. And he loves her so much. The witch's anger passed a little, and she said that if it was true, she would allow him to collect as much Rapunzel as he wanted, but on one condition. He will have to give the witch the child who will be born to his wife. The husband agreed with fear. When the wife gave birth to a daughter, the witch immediately appeared, took the child with her, and named her Rapunzel. Rapunzel became the most beautiful girl in the world. When she was 12 years old, the witch locked her in a tower. That tower was in the forest, and it had no doors or stairs. Only at the very top was a small window. When the witch wanted to climb the tower, she called Rapunzel to pull her sides down. And Rapunzel had long, beautiful hair. She hears the voice of the witch, loosens her braids, ties them up to the window hook, and the hair falls down, and the witch then climbs up, clinging to them. Several years passed, and the king's son happened to ride a horse through the forest where the tower stood. Suddenly he heard singing, and it was so pleasant that he stopped and began to listen. Rapunzel sang it in her wonderful voice. The prince wanted to climb up. He began to look for the entrance to the tower, but it was impossible to find him. He once saw how the witch climbs up the braids that Rapunzel lowered her. And the next day, when it was already getting dark, the prince drove up to the tower and called Rapunzel. She heard, pulled her braids down, and the prince climbed up. Rapunzel, seeing that a man she had never seen came to her, was very frightened at first. But the prince spoke to her affectionately and said that his heart was so touched by the singing that he decided to see her without fail. Then Rapunzel ceased to be afraid, and when he asked if she agreed to marry him, she gave her consent and held out her hand to him. But they just did not know how to go down together. They figured out that when the prince came, he would always take a piece of silk with him, and Rapunzel would weave a ladder out of it. And when the ladder is ready, they will go down it together and leave. The sorceress did not notice anything until one day Rapunzel asked why it is easier to drag the prince up. The sorceress understood everything, got angry and clutched in rage at Rapunzel's beautiful hair. I wrapped them around my left arm several times, and with my right grabbed the scissors and cut them off. She took the sorceress into the dense thicket of Rapunzel and hid her there. She tied the severed braids to the window hook, and when the prince appeared, she pulled them down. The prince climbed up and saw the witch. She looked at him with her malicious look and said that he would never see Rapunzel. The king's son was beside himself with grief and jumped out of the tower in despair, but the thorny thorns of the bushes, on which he fell, gouged out his eyes. The blind prince wandered for several years in grief and sorrow through the forest, all the time grieving and crying for his beloved lost. Once he went into a dense thicket. Suddenly the prince heard someone singing. It seemed so familiar to him, and he went to meet him. When he came closer, Rapunzel recognized him, threw herself on his neck and cried bitterly with joy. 2 tears fell in his eyes, and the prince regained his sight and began to see as before. He brought her to his kingdom, and they lived for many, many years in happiness and joy.